Okay. Good evening and welcome to this additional meeting of the Audit Committee. This evening is the 27th of January 2025. My name is John Barnes. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Audit Committee. I'm chairing this meeting in the absence of Councillor Drayson, the Chair of the Committee, who has family commitments, I think. The officers in the chamber tonight are on my left hand, Lorna Ford, the Chief Executive, on my right hand, Andrew Vallance, the Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer, Anna Everett, the Head of Corporate and Strategic Services, is also present. Charlotte Spendy, welcome to this meeting, the Head of Finance. Louise Hollingsworth, who clerks the meeting, is sitting next to Lorna. Joining us remotely are Darren Wells of Grant Thornton, our auditors, and Petra Deman, the Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Good evening.
Could I ask remote participants to mute their microphones when not speaking? This will reduce feedback and background noise. It will also save bandwidth and therefore your loss of connection. I turn really to the first item on the agenda, which are the minutes of the last meeting. No, sorry, apologies for absence.
It is minutes, Chair.
It is minutes. Can I secure your agreement to those minutes? Everybody in favour? In which case I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Apologies for absence. The Chairman, any others?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor McGurk as well.
Right. Oh, come on. Yeah, there we are. Yes, but we've got one more thing.
Oh, additional agenda.
Yes. Additional items, there are no additional items. And declaration of interest. Any? No. And dispensations, there are none. So I turn now to the external auditors' findings annual audit report. Darren, are you going to take us through this?
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Yes, I will. We have two reports. I will take each one in turn, and I will start with the auditor's annual report, which I think is Appendix A of the agenda of the papers pack. So, as a reminder, the auditor's annual report seeks to set out our conclusions on the arrangements the Council has in place to ensure its financial sustainability, proper governance arrangements, and arrangements to ensure that its resources are used efficiently, effectively, and economically. We are required to provide a balanced commentary where we think that your arrangements aren't appropriate. We determine whether the deficiency is such that we would highlight a significant weakness. If we did highlight a significant weakness, we would make a key recommendation. Where we think there are opportunities to improve your arrangements, but they don't represent or are not in respect of a significant weakness, then we raise improvement recommendations. I'm pleased to say that we haven't identified any significant weaknesses in your arrangements across financial sustainability, governance, or the 3 E's. Under financial sustainability, it's clear that much of the local government sector is struggling to ensure it remains sustainable over the medium term. We highlight on, as part of our executive summary, that the Rother Council has a fairly weak track record of delivering efficiency savings, those efficiency savings that it plans to make. You did have a financial sustainability programme that's been reshaped and re-energised as the Fit for the Future programme, and it is key that that programme starts to deliver the quantum of savings and the transformation that you expect it to, so that your medium-term financial sustainability is not put at risk. Under governance, one of the things that I would highlight is we note that the statement of accounts, the publication date was not met by the statutory deadline. I think that was for one-off reasons, and therefore it shouldn't be a recurring problem. Under the 3Es, we do note that, again, the local government sector is facing additional cost pressures arising from homelessness and temporary accommodation. And as a council, you're not immune from that. But we comment on your arrangements, and we think what you are doing all that you can currently to address those challenges, and we don't highlight any significant weaknesses in your arrangements. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction. I'll take the report as read, but I'm happy to pick up any questions that members may have.
I think on homelessness, Darren, our track record is actually much better than our neighbours. I think because of the provision we made of buying properties to house someone rather than using hotels, we're probably about 9% of our budget, whereas in our neighbouring authorities, it's over 30%. So I think that pressure we're handling reasonably well, and we're going on buying properties. So I hope we can reassure you on that one. Do you want to comment on the other point about the one-off problem that we had in finance?
Just to say that our chief accountant resigned on the 31st of March last year, which isn't very helpful when you're about to do the accounts, and we had to get by with temps during the summer. But fortunately, Ola came back in the autumn and has turned around the accounts very quickly in order to meet this urgent audit deadline. That means we have avoided the backstop. Just for members' contacts, there's best part of 1,000 sets of accounts that have not been, what's the phrase? It's disclaimed across the country, and there's a key end of February backstop this year for 23-24 accounts, and we've managed to meet the deadline. So none of our previous years have been disclaimed either, so we are in a much better position than many authorities.
Yes, and there are many authorities that are way behind.
Yep.
Yeah. I think probably if we turn to page 41, that's where you have recommendations. There's quite a lot of amber in this report, Darren, where you were making recommendations where we could improve. And maybe if members turn to those, and if they have any comments or questions, that will be quite useful. I really look around to see if Patrick.
Like to do. In terms of this new programme, the Fit for the Future, there is a recommendation that it's more closely scrutinised, I think might be the right term. And it occurred to me that although the Overview and Scrutiny Committee monitor the schemes, no one actually looks, I don't think, at the detail, and I wonder whether internal audit might be something that could be done, because they do seem to get to the bottom of problems very well, and that might be some assistance, I would have thought, if the internal audit managed to squeeze that into their programme.
Well, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. We do have a process of internally looking at Fit for the Future through something called the Corporate Programme Board, which looks at the 4 work streams that make up Fit for the Future. And it has been now embedded into our council plan. So the council plan was adopted in December, and the proposal is that we will bring back a report that will go through overview and scrutiny committee. It will go on an annual basis, so you may think that needs a bit of a check-in in between, but we will report back on how we're delivering against the 3 themes of the council plan, as well as Fit for the Future. So that's kind of a new part to the monitoring. But there's quite a lot of internal governance around how we're doing around each of the work streams. So it isn't something that doesn't have attention through the year, but it's probably its main kind of focus in terms of bringing it to committee will be through the annual report to the council plan.
It may be worth commenting on the performance in the current year, which the new programme has delivered a much higher proportion of the savings than the previous one. And of course, the previous one did depend heavily on devolution, and it does take 2 to tango, and a lot of smaller local authorities did not want to take on services at that stage. That may, of course, change now that we are likely in the near future, or possibly slightly more distant future, move to be a unitary authority. I think that may wake up town councils and parish councils. Andrew, do you want to comment on this year's savings programme?
Yeah, just to say, this year we've already achieved over 80% of the savings, and that is in stark contrast to the previous year, when I think only 15% were achieved. So that has, taking it to ONS has focused officers' attention on delivering those savings because they know they are being reported to members, and that has made a big difference, I think.
Richard, you look pregnant with a question.
You're not wrong, Chair. Well, it has not been a question, actually, as an observation. It is simply that one of the objectives set here is for the housing company, of course, to develop and refine its set of KPIs. And this is something which has been put on the back burner, basically, by the housing company, because we have been preoccupied with negotiations, etc., with the council over a whole range of things. And also we've been dealing with repercussions coming from the Spine Road difficulties and so on. But at the last board meeting, we did set a date, I think April, May, for this programme to be advanced and completed. So we will be moving forward on the KPIs, which the auditors want us to do, and I'm sure this committee would like us to do as well. And we should be doing that round about Easter. Just to let everybody know. We are working on that one, okay, and making it a new priority. Thank you, Chair.
Looking at the first recommendation on page 42, or rather the summary of the first recommendation, I'm not sure I feel altogether happy, and I'd be interested in other members' views, that we don't inflation-proof the budget, at least in the view of our auditors, in quite the way that we should. We are obviously in problems because the government doesn't inflation-proof its help to us, but it doesn't obviate the need for accurate budgeting, otherwise you end up in overspend territory. And so it seems to me that comment is a little questionable. It's not always possible to inflate. I think we should always inflation-proof the budget and make it realistic. But I'd welcome comments from our Section 1.5 officer or from Charlotte on that issue.
Just to reinstate what you've already said, really, we don't receive inflation-proof funding from the government, so we can't always put inflation on all our budgets. So, in effect, they are additional savings that officers are required to make if we trim their budgets, and they are made aware of that fact, that their budget has been cut in real terms. Yeah. And that's just the reality we're in. Unfortunately, we don't have 9.5% fee increases like the external auditors. We get minus 3%. So we don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
I certainly wouldn't defend the government's action in it. It seems to me quite outrageous that they don't inflation-proof their grants to us in any shape or form. But I think we ourselves have got to be more prudent than the government is. And the government itself is moving towards a 3-year review, which they're going to have to take 5% at minimum out of budgets, the non-protected budgets. Unfortunately, I think we're likely to be one of the non-protected departments. Charlotte.
I just wanted to add to what Andrew said, that I think it's worth noting that where it is a known quantity, such as the pay inflation, that has been provided for in the budget for the forthcoming year, just to provide that assurance.
Darren, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, yes, so we know you're not necessarily funded for inflationary increases, and we appreciate it's not a perfect world. The focus of our recommendation was for you to ensure that in preparing your annual budget, your estimates of inflationary costs are as accurate as you can make them, so that you don't actually understate the quantum of savings you may need to find in the year, or in fact the draw that you may need to make on your reserves. So it was seeking to be as clear and as transparent at the time of budget setting as much as possible.
I rather think the Audit Committee would agree with that, while sympathising with the officers and the problem they face. Yes, I see a number of nodding heads. Incidentally, there are a number of to-be confirms on dates. Presumably these are now being chased up, yes. Are they, Andrew? Yeah. Excellent. I'll go through page by page for the next 2 or 3 pages, see if there are any questions. Page 43. Page 44. Yes, Polly?
Oh, thank you, Chair. On the middle one, which I think is number 8, it says the Council should review its internal complaints handling processes to identify any common themes. Would that be coming to the Standard Committee?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a very good idea. At the moment, we look at the Ombudsman complaints, but I think a more general report about our learning from complaints is a good idea. I think we should do that. Absolutely.
We note in the minutes we would recommend the New Standards Committee does that. And indeed that Mark makes a report on where he's got to on this particular recommendation to the New Standards Committee. The audit effectiveness review we are going to carry out in March, so we will have met that one by the end of the financial year. If I move to page 45, Richard's KPI point is addressed there.
Can I just apologise for not having declared as chair of the Housing Company earlier, so my apologies for that.
We are getting regular reports on Blackfriars, which is now nearing its completion, much to, I think, everybody's relief.
Are we on target for March 2025?
Thoughts or what?
Sorry, can you, through the chair, please?
It says the Blackfriars scheme is now nearing practical completion. It's expected to be finished by March 2025. R11, page 45.
The situation is that the Spine Road is now proceeding well. The margin for bad weather, etc., is narrower than ideally it could be. That's the case. But at the same time, there's also an arrangement whereby the housing company, or rather, sorry, Greymore, on behalf of the housing company, will be taking over some of the completion work on the Spine Road, and that will improve the liaison on the site between the construction of the Spine Road and the construction of the housing, it will make it much easier for those two to be effortlessly dovetailed, and that will be to the advantage of the project overall. What is happening is the company is moving, Greenmore are moving onto fields 2 and 3 because they're dedicating access to some aspects of field 1. And because they're doing this, they will be to make up some of the time that has been lost through other delays. And so at the moment, the housing company is reasonably happy with the way in which the schedule of that is working out. Thank you, Chair.
I think, Darren, we've covered your recommendations now, unless there's anything you want to say by way of summary.
Not for that report, Chair. I'm happy to move on to Appendix B if you are ready for that.
Indeed I am, Darren. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So this is the audit findings report. It reports the findings from the financial statements audit. As we've previously reported to this committee, the audit start was delayed from the plan of July, and we started in earnest really once we had a draft set of accounts given to us, which was at the beginning of November. So consequently, we're only now nearing the completion of the audit. I think it's been fair to say that it's not been a particularly smooth audit this year compared to past years, and we report the key reasons for that on pages 16 and 17 of the audit findings report itself. We know that officers have worked hard to get us to this point, and we do thank them for their continued commitment. On page 4 of the audit findings report, we highlight those areas where our work has still not finished. So that largely covers testing of journal transfers, completion of valuation of property, plant and equipment, a full review by senior members of the audit team, and a few other bits and bobs. And I only mention that because until an audit's complete, any outstanding items, there are potential for issues to be identified from these. And if there were, and they were significant, then we do need a mechanism in which we can bring those to your attention before we can sign the opinion. And as an example, I mentioned property, plant and equipment. One thing that we're still exploring with officers is whether there's any indication of any impairment for assets that are currently held on the balance sheet. And an example of that may be where we're still waiting for confirmation is the expenditure to date on the Town Hall Renaissance project. Officers have said that they will give us a summary of their analysis of whether an impairment has occurred or not at the beginning of February. So we won't be able to conclude on that until at least after the 6th of February. On page 28 of the audit findings report, we set out 3 recommendations that have arisen from this year's work. And on page 29 to 31 of the report, we set out the progress on the implementation of prior year recommendations. There's a mixture of recommendations not fully implemented and a number that have been fully implemented. And then on page 32 to 35, we highlight the audit adjustments that we've identified and the position against each of those. And then finally to say, we do at this point in time, based on what we know from the outcome of completed audit work, we do anticipate issuing an unqualified audit opinion, and subject to clearing those outstanding elements, we should be in a position to do that before the backstop date of the 28th of February. We won't certify the closure of the 23-24 audit because you may recall We had a number of objections that were made in 2022-23. 4 objections were made. 1 was withdrawn. 1 we have concluded on and have written to the objector and to the council, so 1 has been completed. 1 we have completed our consideration and it's just going into through internal review, and which includes a legal consideration, so we should be able to write to the objector and the council quite soon. And for the 3rd one, we are just drawing our thoughts together to prepare a written response. That's all I was going to say, Chair. Happy to pick up any questions that members may have.
I see no questions at the moment. Andrew, do you want to comment?
Not on this specifically, but just to update members on what's going on nationally with audit. The government is currently out to consultation, came out the same day as the settlement actually, so it's been a bit overshadowed, on new arrangements for external audit, and in effect they are planning to reinvent the Audit Commission. And they're currently out to consultation on what powers and what activities that body may do, so it's a local audit office, and one of those considerations is whether to have public sector auditors again, as the Audit Commission did. And the other major thing would be making it mandatory to have an independent member on the committee. And one of the consultations is whether that independent member should be the chair of the committee or not. But unfortunately, none of this is going to come in until 2028, by which time we may not be here. So it's more for information at the minute than action.
Yes. I note on page 91 of our report that the agreement has now been reached with Rother Housing Company, but we still lack agreement from Wealdon. I wonder if you would just update us on where you're meeting with the head of the Wealdon Services got you.
If this is on the legal, is this on the legal lesson?
Yes, it's on the legal lesson.
We are still in disagreement about fees and inflation on the fees, and I've asked to see the paperwork where they claim Rother signed for RPI instead of CPI, but they haven't produced that paperwork yet.
Right.
And it's quite a significant difference over the last 6 or 7 years.
Yes,
many tens of thousands of pounds
yeah.
between the 2 inflation rates. Always sign contracts on CPI.
Are there any other questions on this part of the report? In which case, I think we can note this. And I think that brings us to the end.
Proposer and seconder, Chair. We need a proposer and seconder.
Yes. I need a proposer and a seconder to note this report. Polly and yeah. Excellent. All in favour? Darren, thank you very much for your attendance. You're very welcome to remain, but if you want to leave, I think this would be fully understood.
Thank you, Chair. We will take our leave. Wish you a good evening.
Night, night. Right. And now we go on to the Treasury Management Report. Item 6, the mid-year position. Do you want to introduce this?
Okay, just this is the half-year report, and the next committee will have the 9-month report. It's been a fairly quiet year so far. We don't have a lot of debt. We've repaid some debt this year, £5 million of debt to PWB. In terms of our interest we've earned, we are slightly ahead of target on interest, which is one of our Fit for the Future targets, making up quite a bit of the sum of money in the savings. What I would do, though, is there is one big risk on the horizon. So it's mentioned in the report in terms of the government likely to, I'll just find the paragraph, It's IFRS 9, the paragraph about that, towards the end. Machine stops jumping around. The screen's just jumping up and down. So you've got the paragraph on IFRS 9. Let's just up a bit. Right, down a bit. Paragraph 22.
Paragraph 22.
Right, so we've got a couple of investments with property investments with CCLA and Hermes, and currently there is what's called a statutory override, where you don't have to take any losses on those investments to the revenue account in year. So on the basis of hopefully, if you've got losses, eventually they'll turn around and go back up to at least more than their original value. We're making interest on them, but it's the capital value of those two investments. So potentially from next year, we would have to take any losses to the revenue account in year. And that could be in the region of several £100,000 for each. But there's an added complication now in that Hermes has had a run on investors taking money out of it to the extent where its future is now in some doubt. There's an EGM this week about whether to keep trading or not, or whether to have a takeover by another body. The problem with the takeover proposal is that as a local authority, we would not be eligible to be part of that takeover. It's more, most of the fund is owned by pension funds, and the terms of that takeover would be only pension funds would be eligible to go across to the new body. So in effect, we would have to sort of cash in our chips at the time and take the loss in potentially next financial year. So there is just a risk there that the fund may close, and if the IFRS 9 would be irrelevant then, because the fund would close, so we'd have to take the loss anyway. But just to flag up that there could be some issues next year with both of those funds, and depending on what the government does with IFRS 9 and what happens with Hermes, and there's an EGM I'm going to on Thursday, I think, to discuss it and what the future of that fund is. These are both long-term property funds that council's had for years, many years, and has made lots of interest out of, just to say, but we may have to, some changes to technical accounting or the future of one of those funds may require us to take a hit in the accounts next year. Just to flag that up now.
Sorry, Andrew, does that mean then that the Hermes one, if we take a hit, that the £3 million we originally invested, we lose that?
No, a section of it.
So we lose it at the moment where...
The value of it's changing every day.
So it's 538,000.
So it's going to be in hundreds of thousands probably. Okay. Yeah. So, and hopefully whatever actions are taken will stabilise that value as much as possible. And that's the sort of debate we'll be having at the EGM. How do we get that value as high as possible, because we can't all go across to the new fund.
Yes, that's not good news.
No.
Right. One of the oddities about this report, which is very satisfactory in most respects, is the economic forecast from Link, which you report to us, which is really, it's out of date because we are now in January. B, it really was over-optimistic. And I do wonder really what we're paying Link for.
We are getting advice from them on a daily basis, so I accept these reports are out of date by the time they're published, especially in the increasingly volatile economic situation that the world is in at the minute, where things are changing by the day.
Yes.
Literally by the day. Twice a day PW rates change. Gilts go up one week, massively down the next. I've never seen anything like it. We've had a couple of decades of quite stable figures and low PWB rates, low interest rates everyone will be aware of, and it has gone a bit crazy the last few months.
But you think their daily advice is still valuable?
Oh yes, we do need to have advisors.
I wonder whether therefore probably we don't report
Yeah.
out-of-date position reports because they're really of no help to us, and they really probably do less than justice to the advice we're getting. I mean, the economic forecast at the moment is pretty grim. It's likely to change again. But I'm not surprised that Hermes is in some trouble. CCLA seems to be much more robust. But whether we can adjust that in any way, I frankly find it doubtful. There we go. We will know about that at the time of the next report.
Possibly. Depends what decisions they make.
We might wait for an update and advice on how we're going to handle that, because that will presumably knock our reserves.
There's not a lot we can do because they've frozen withdrawals from the funds, so it's not as if I could say we need to make a decision between withdrawing now or hanging on.
Yeah.
We can't take our money out at the minute because the fund would collapse if everyone took it. Everyone would take their money out and it would collapse overnight. So
So we've got to sit and hope that they get a good deal.
Yes.
Right. Any questions for anybody? I think, therefore, again, we're in a position to note the position. Can I have a proposer, Polly? Seconder? Tony? Councillor Bakers? All in favour? That brings us to the last item tonight, which is the work programme. We revert to our normal partner meetings after tonight's additional meeting. Are there any comments on the work programme for 2025-26? Yes?
Chair, can I just ask about the position in relation to the leisure centre, etc.? I'm not quite clear what the position on this is. We saw in a document the other meeting of the Audit Committee that there's going to be expenditure on upgrading the existing premises. But at the same time, at the SIL meeting, there was talk of setting aside money to build the leisure centre. So what exactly is our policy on that? Are we thinking in terms of building the leisure centre and replacing the existing facilities, or are we thinking in terms of upgrading indefinitely the existing facilities and shelving the leisure centre proposal? Where are we on that project, please?
Are you in a position to comment?
We are going to have an away day, officers' away day at the start of March, and then members' away day, probably cabinet members, I'm assuming, away day later in March. So bearing in mind what happens later this week in terms of the reorganisation deadlines, to look at the capital programme, the corporate plan, prioritise what we could get done in whatever remaining time we have. So we will take a fresh look at all of our commitments. Clean paper, we need to spend a lot of time on reorganisation. We don't want to start lots of projects that flow over into the new authorities' timescales. Something like a leisure centre may be best looked at by a larger authority that can look at the bigger picture, Bexhill, Hastings, etc. So we will review all of that on these away days. So it is all a bit up in the air at the minute in terms of our future.
Thank you, Andrew, for that answer. My next question arises from your answer, really. How confident are we that we will be able to spend the levelling up money which has been given to Rother District Council in the time this council has for its own life? Do we expect we'll be able to spend all that money, or will some of that money be left unspent? And in which case, what would happen to it? Will that money just, as it were, vaporise, or will that money be passed on to a successor council? Do we know that yet, or is it yet another thing that's up in the air, please?
Duncan is talking to the ministry weekly basis, isn't it? Very frequently about all these sort of issues. So we will make sure that we get to spend the money or pass the money on to an appropriate body that could spend it on the allocated project or a reallocated project should that away day decide to spend the money on a different project.
Third question.
That's good news. But I just want to say that I think that a lot of people on the council and in the area would want to see as much of that money spent as soon as possible, and it should be a priority to spend that levelling up money. So if the council is to disappear, it disappears, if you like, leaving the best possible legacy for the district in its wake. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I agree with that, Councillor Thomas. Again, we've got to have some sense of what bodies are going to exist to take on some of these services, because at the end of the day, the new authority is not going to be in a very good financial position. The outcome for local government is fairly bleak financially, and we will not we'll leave a healthy financial position, but not a great one. So I think devolution becomes quite important. In some areas, there are bodies which could take on this facility, as Rye, for example, is taking on a leisure facility. But other facilities, frankly, part of what the officers will have to decide, I think, is whether there is an ongoing authority which will be prepared to run it. And I think that's a very real question for a lot of our non-statutory services. So a cautionary remark from the chair on that one.
Follow that up as well. I mean, obviously the money was awarded to Rother District Council, and it was awarded to us on a basis of an evaluation of our needs. And so I think it would be appropriate to have as much money spent locally as possible, because a wider authority may not share the urgency of need that this particular authority has in some parts of the district. So I think that's a reason for making it a real priority to be able to push forward the projects connected with those levelling up funds for the sake of the other people here. Thank you, Chair.
I think you may take it the officers are well seized of the importance of what you're saying, but also the need for due caution about the future. If there are no other points being made on the work programme, I don't think we have to approve it because there are no revisions. I missed something earlier, and I think we ought to put it right for the minutes. One of the recommendations for an improvement was that we should make an annual report. Well, it was to make sure Cabinet did look at risks. And my suggestion from the chair will be that at the very least we make an annual report from this committee as to the risks that this council faces. Anna, I take it you would think that's a sensible proceeding.
Yes, I do. I'll have to just update the risk policy to reflect that, but absolutely.
Yeah. Does anybody want to comment on that? If not, can that be inserted at the appropriate place in the minutes? I apologise for missing it at the time. With that apology, thank you all for your attendance. I declare this meeting closed.